So who all has both parents or all your parents with you 24/7? Hey, Abby. Yeah. Hello, Abby. You're unmute. Are you unmuted, Abby? You can talk, Abby, if you want. You can tell people hello. What? Hello, Abby. Abby is actually not at home with us now. She's visiting her sister. Did I already say that yesterday? You know what? My days are running together now. Okay, I'll tell you what. We are waiting. Let's see. Who else am I waiting for? Mateus. I'm waiting for Viana. Who else am I waiting for? Mateus, Viana, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. I'm missing. Oh, Andrew. Was everybody online for Spanish? So is it feasible to think Andrew's here, or was he not online for Spanish? Okay, well, I'll tell you what, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mute you guys so we get started, and then we will go from there. Oh, there he is. Hello, Andrew. How are you, bud? You're unmuted. You can say hello. Okay, I'm going to mute everybody, and all right, here we go. Give it a second. Okay, everybody's muted now. Hey, Diana, how are you? Okay, we're going to start. We're waiting for Mateus. We'll see if he joins, but I think that's the only one we're waiting for. So let's go. We'll go ahead and start. If you look over my shoulder, you can see a Bible verse, Jeremiah 33:3, and the word call. I want to talk to you a little bit about this before we get into our lesson. I didn't talk about it yesterday. I did talk about it this morning with my history kids this morning, my 7th and 8th graders. But I just want to talk a little bit about just some encouragement as we're facing these crazy times. Even though we're doing geography, it's still history. Even though we're learning places and date or places and names and things like that, it's still history we're learning to a certain degree. We're still learning different historical facts, different things like that, even though it's more of a geography type class, obviously, than a U.S. history class. But nonetheless, it is history. And at some point, whether it's with you guys, probably, maybe not, depends on if they rewrite the curriculum in the next couple of years, definitely your kids, and definitely if you go to college and take any history classes, you're going to see what we're going through now show up in your history books. You guys are really too young to really be able to have the stories of, I remember when, so to speak. I remember when the Challenger space shuttle exploded. I was a senior in high school. I remember I was sitting in my cafeteria in January of that year, January of 1986. That's the year I graduated high school. Back in the dark ages, where's Yana? Back in the day, Yana, as we would say. But I remember that, and that is history. You can go to a history book now. You can go to potentially science if you're studying any type of space exploration and science, and you can read about that. 9/11, obviously. You guys were not born pre-9/11. I remember where I was when the towers went down. I remember what happened afterwards. We lived outside of Washington, D.C., so we probably experienced it a little bit more maybe than someone that might have lived somewhere else in the United States. So I remember when huge historical things happened. I didn't have to read about my history book. I lived through it. You guys, unfortunately, your age, you don't really have a lot you've lived through. You don't know what it was like before 9/11 to understand what we're doing now. You just know post 9/11. But what I wanted to encourage you guys, before we get into our history lesson, we are facing some crazy times that will be in your history book at one point. And you'll be able to tell your kids or your grandkids or whoever, hey, I lived through coronavirus 2020. I know what it was like to have school called off for the rest of the year and we had to do distance learning. I remember when all the malls closed down. I remember when the movie theaters closed down. I remember this. But to a certain degree, all that'll be memories and you can, go back on it and, either talk fondly of it or talk about how horrible it was, whatever the case was. But we still need some encouragement to get through that time till the history becomes what it is, history. And I want to encourage you with Jeremiah 33:3. I'm going to read it to you real quick. Most of you guys probably know the verse, or at least will know it once I start reading it. We'll talk about different parts of it every day, but I want to focus on the first word today. It says, "Call unto me, and I will answer thee, and show thee great and mighty things which thou knowest not." We are definitely living in a time where we don't know a whole lot. Every day is a different day. You turn the news on, and depending on what news station you turn on, they're going to tell you something different. Either more people are being tested, or more people are getting COVID-19, the coronavirus. They're getting better in China, they're not getting better in China. Italy's getting worse, Italy's getting better. No matter what you listen to, there's so many unknowns. And I know for me as an adult, it's as much unknown as it is to you, but I understand it maybe a little bit more. I can weather the storm, so to speak, just because I've lived a lot longer than you guys. You guys, your whole world's being turned upside down. Some of you guys are used to seeing your friends every day, and now you can text, you can FaceTime, you can, get on your Zoom class, whatever the case is, but your whole world's turned upside down. So I want to encourage you with Jeremiah 33. I want to talk about the first word, call, today. I'm spending a lot of time just in prayer for you guys, in prayer for our school, in prayer for our country, in prayer for our president. I mean, this is not the time where we sit back and say, we've got this all figured out, no big deal. Not that we only call on the Lord when times are tough, but this is a time. I know some of you guys have moms and dads and sisters and aunts and uncles that might work in the healthcare profession, and there's some unknowns there with them. You guys, I don't know if you know anyone that's contracted the coronavirus. Our family knows somebody, not here. It's a pastor friend of ours in Virginia that contracted it. So, it's some of you it's hitting more home with than others. Some of you just see it on the news, and if you're like me, sometimes I'd rather watch Hallmark than watch the news because coronavirus isn't on Hallmark yet, thank goodness. But sometimes you just need, a check out of reality, so to speak. But I want to encourage you: read the verse, meditate on the verse, ask the Lord to help you during this. I would be not a very good history teacher if I didn't, give you the capabilities or encourage you on how to get through this historical period. And one day we'll look back, and it may be, maybe in September when we come back to school together, in the fall, and we can all laugh about it and talk about it, and have our stories and laugh about the video classes and whatnot. I don't know; it's all unknown, but we just want to focus on that first word is call. Call on the Lord, ask Him to help you. I mean, I've been praying just for God to give me wisdom, God to give me peace, God to give me understanding, God to just give me patience in going through this. Some of you guys, your family dynamics are changing. You're having all your both parents, older siblings. In Andrew's case, his grandparents are still here with him. So a lot of things are changing, and some of you guys aren't used to having everybody at home all the time, and it's difficult, and it's it's a learning curve. So anyway, so I want to leave with that before we get into our class. So go ahead and open your books to page 215. We'll start here just briefly. We're not going to spend a lot of time on what the text says. I have some other things I want to go over, but turn to page 215, and I want to pick up our discussion on the melting pot. If I were to ask you, if you were physically sitting in front of me and I asked you, what is America known for? What comes to mind when we talk about the United States of America? We can talk about, I'm sure if I unmuted you at this point, I could get, there's 12 of you, I could get 12 different things of what United States, first thing that comes to mind. But if we kind of wrapped it all up together, we would probably talk about the fact the United States is really referred to as a melting pot. And what's a melting pot? We hear that a lot. You hear that term a lot. I probably know it more maybe because I'm older than you. You don't hear about it as much now. And we'll talk about that, why you don't hear that term as much, or why we don't think of that term maybe in the same way that we thought about it even 50 years ago. But I want to talk about that. We can't talk about the United States of America. We can't talk about this portion of North America if we don't address the melting pot, if we don't address what makes the country the country. We talked about Asia. We knew how to define Asia. We knew that we could define it with Islam. We knew you could define it with desert. oil, things like that. When we talked about Africa, you could define it as tribes, you could define it as the interior, you could define it as whatever. And that's the same with the United States of America. We can define it by landmarks, we can define it by monuments, things like that. But if you kind of encompass the whole thing, we talk a lot about it being a melting pot, being a land of opportunity, being a place where it's not just one group of people. You're made up. We hear all the time, I don't know if you watch any of the TV with Ancestry.com. Everybody wants to know where they came from. Everybody wants to know their ancestry, wants to know what their DNA says about them as far as where they came from. And people are saying, I'm part Italian, I'm part Polish, I'm part Russian, I'm part whatever. We're always saying that. And that's what makes America, that's what makes America, is just the fact that how we can all coexist and how we can all came together from all these different parts of the world to make one nation, to make one group of people. But let's talk a little bit about it. If you look in the book on page 215, it says in the middle of the page on the left-hand column, it says the United States is a nation of immigrants. Immigrant simply a term of somebody who's foreign to whatever country they're living in. If I were to go and want to live in France, I would be an immigrant to France because I'm not from France. I'm not French. I wasn't born in France. So an immigrant, while it could be, some people have coined that word maybe into a not so nice word or a derogatory word. It's simply someone who's foreign, someone who's not from there. It says the United States is a nation of immigrants. It's not like we just have immigrants in New York City or we have immigrants in California. We have immigrants all over the country. It says about 4/5 of the population is of European lineage, but many Americans come from other parts of the world. The Spanish-speaking Americans make up the largest minority group, followed by Black Americans and Asian Americans. So some statistics I was reading earlier state that some states, some portions of the country, being Caucasian, being white, that ethnicity, that ethnic group, is really becoming more of a minority now. So our country is constantly evolving, constantly changing. It's not the same United States of America that we saw in the 1700s. What we're seeing in 2020 is vastly different. It says, if you look over on the other side of 215, it says Americans enjoy one of the highest standards of living in the world. And we're going to talk about that. America is known, the United States is known as the land of opportunity. Opportunity for what? Opportunity to better yourselves economically, better yourselves financially. Now, not everyone who came to America, who immigrated to America, came for economic reasons. Some came for religious reasons, some came for a host of different reasons. But they came seeking a better life than what they had wherever they came from. Whether that's a better life religiously, a better life economically, a better life socially, whatever the case, we're seeking something better. Typically, people don't move someplace unless they are trying to better themselves. Think about it. This isn't always the case, but most of the time when you want to move, like whenever we've moved homes, other than moving from Virginia to Pennsylvania, whenever we moved in the Northern Virginia region, we were moving to better ourselves. Either we needed a bigger house or we wanted to move into a different neighborhood or whatever the case was. You typically will do that to better yourself. And it doesn't mean you're trying to up yourselves financially. It just means you're trying to better your situation, better your circumstance. When we were living in Northern Virginia, the home we lived in 2 homes ago, I don't know how many bedrooms we had, 4 or 5 bedrooms, something like that. But our kids, at that point we had 9 kids at home with us. Well, we needed more space. So we were able to move to a different county, which is a lower cost of living from where we live, but we were able to get a bigger home to obviously house our bigger family. So we're trying to better our position, not, like I said, not like we just won the lottery, but just we needed to make it more comfortable. So people that were leaving wherever they were from, whether it's Africa or Asia or Europe or whatever the case was, they're leaving to find what they believe is something better in the United States of America. So let's talk about the whole melting pot analogy. A melting pot. Actually, that phrase was started in the 1780s. We think of that being a more modern phrase, but really it's more more contemporary for the late 1700s into the 1800s, the early 1900s than it is in 2020. We don't see it the same way in our day and age that they did, 300 years ago, for example. Basically, if you look at what the textbook definition of melting pot is, it's the fusion or the coming together. When you fuse something, it's adhered tightly, meaning if you fuse pieces of metal together, well, the object of that, of fusing the metals together, is not to be able to separate it. So you're fusing together nationalities, cultures, and ethnicity. So you're fusing together different cultures, different groups of people into something that's a new product, so to speak, something that can't be torn apart, something that can't be brought apart. It says until the 1900s, so until, even up to about 120 years ago, diversity was considered a liability, not a strength. We look at 2020 now. If you were to look at, like, those of you in a couple of years are going to be looking at colleges, we look at school systems, look at different corporations. A lot of times people advertise we're a diverse company, we're a diverse school, we're a diverse university, meaning we embrace the fact that we're not all the same, that we're different. We might have people coming from different nations, different nationalities, different speaking people. Until the 1900s, this was actually seen as more of a curse than it was a blessing. In the 1900s, people did not want the diverseness. They did not want, they wanted to be able to identify solely with who they were, who their people were, and they didn't want people from the outside messing that up. Actually, that's about the time up until the 1900s where many cultures made its pejorative, I had to look that word up, never even heard that word, nouns for those who weren't part of their nationality. That just basically means a negative word. For example, non-native speakers of Spanish, the word was coined gringos. You were known as a gringo. Now, a gringo is not a kind word. Back when they coined it, it was basically a negative word, meaning if you were called that, they could readily identify you as someone who wasn't part of their group of people. So diversity was seen as something that people did not want. They didn't embrace it. They were afraid of it. They were afraid of the different nationalities coming in for whatever reason. You see that a lot when we talked about Nazi Germany. You saw that where they didn't, embracing diversity was definitely not the Nazi regime was trying to do. In fact, they were wanting to do the polar opposite of that. So being diverse was never something that they were proud of. Americans were proud of, people were proud of. And it wasn't just Americans. It was obviously, depending on different cultures, different parts of the world, they wanted to maintain their identity. It felt like if they let other people in, then their identity would be threatened. They wouldn't be as secure a group of people as they were before. Says the United States steadily evolved to define Americans, and this is interesting when I read this, as what made the United States different than all these other groups of people around the world who were trying their best to hold on to who they were, trying their best to hold on to their identity, is the United States steadily evolved, and that means it didn't happen overnight. Nothing ever happens overnight. It's over time. To define Americans by their shared values, not by their superficial appearance. That's huge. And that's what makes America great. Americans come together with what we value, what we share in our values, not what we look like. That, unfortunately, is what, when you get to the diversity and people shying away from diversity, they will categorize you. Well, if you're not the same skin color, then they don't want anything to do with you. Or if you don't speak the same language, then they don't want anything to do with you. Americans are looking more at the overall picture, what you value. You value freedom, you value family, you value things like that. That's more important to Americans than where you came from, what made you different. And that's what started setting America apart. That's where the melting pot analogy, that's where it became a good thing to be known as the melting pot. So the melting pot ethos, or characteristic of what the melting pot embraced, was a spirit of cultural and community as manifested in its beliefs and aspirations. Everyone that wanted to come to America, that were immigrating to America, they came because of what they were aspiring to do. They wanted a better life for their family. They wanted more opportunities for their children. They wanted more opportunities for their family. Whatever the case was, they were aspiring to something different. You've heard the term an aspiring actress. It's someone who wants to be an actress and aspiring to do that. And that's what these people are doing. They were aspiring to something greater than what they had, and they saw that in America. It says various ethnic groups enriched America with diverse art, food, music, literature, while accepting a common culture and American values and institutions. So when people came over, when the melting pot image was starting to be displayed, people weren't giving up who they were. They weren't giving up who made them who they were. They were just accepting it in a common culture and American values and institutions. So they were not looking at it as like, if you don't accept my food, or if my food's different, then I can't believe what you want to believe. They learned to embrace that. I mean, think about it. The Mexican culture with the Mexican influence here, food-wise, and art and literature, and the Spanish culture, and even in our school, the Russian culture, the Ukrainian culture, I look now, when we had school here, guys, and I would be coming to lunch and heating up pizza bagels, and I was looking at what some of you guys were bringing for lunch that your parents made you based on, how they were cooking and stuff. And it's just like, wow, I got pizza bagels, and look how great food you guys have. We joked a lot, Janice, about Andrew bringing you Indian food because he owed it to you. At this point, Janice, you may need to give that up. I'm not sure that's going to happen this school year. But that's what makes people, just because we eat different food, just because we have different art, just because we have different music, doesn't mean we can't come together in an umbrella and embrace what makes the country great. It only is benefiting it, only is making it better. It's diversity. It's interesting. Diversity, I've read this quote, is an ornament, but unity is our strength. So think about it as a Christmas tree. You have a Christmas tree, and you have different ornaments that you put on your Christmas tree. It's still a Christmas tree, no matter what you put on it. But you can do, you can have different themes. If your moms or dads, whoever decorates your tree, has different themes every year, or what you want, so that it doesn't change the tree. It just changes maybe the way the tree looks. It makes the tree prettier. It gives the tree personality. And that's kind of how you look at diversity, is you look at it as almost like an ornament where it just enhances the beauty of whatever you're enhancing. In this case, enhancing American values by the beauty of this melting pot image. The first wave of immigration happened in the between 1890 and 1920. That was kind of the initial wave. We had immigrants coming, obviously, up to that point, but the actual wave, like if you had to characterize what time in history did immigration really explode, really take off, and that was pretty much between 1890 and 1920. You had Irish, German, Italians, Eastern Europeans, you had people from Poland, you had people from Russia, and they were basically fleeing either racial tensions, political tensions, seeking economic relief. They shed all the whatever undesirable aspects that they were leaving to come to a common goal, and that was to aspire to something better in America. So you had this huge wave, about 18 million people during that time frame. You're looking at about a 30-year time frame. 18 million people immigrated to the United States. Obviously, that brought huge change to the face of what the United States, but they didn't come seeking something of their own. They came because they wanted something better that America had to offer. They assimilated themselves into America. They still kept their identity. I mean, if you go into different cities now, you'll find Little Italy, and you'll find Chinatown, and you'll find Little Poland. Things like you'll find pockets of these people, pockets of these groups of communities, but they came together as a whole for the value. They were American. They just brought those different ornaments, so to speak, like the Christmas tree. Today, historians believe we're experiencing our second wave of immigration, where we're seeing a lot of Asian and Latin American influences coming in. So it's not like immigration is new. Like we hear a lot about that now politically speaking, about immigrations, different things like that. It's not new. It's been here ever since, we started. I mean, everyone that came to Jamestown, everyone that came to Plymouth Rock were immigrants. They came from somewhere else. The only non-immigrants are the Native American people that were here to begin with. But we're basically, this new wave of immigration is what's challenging this melting pot theory that we have now. It said this country can transform people of any color and background into one America. That's what the melting pot started out to be. Unfortunately, this new wave of immigration, this new wave of thinking is what's challenging the whole melting pot theory, melting pot idea that we've known for so long. And it's a great unknown right now. People are scared. People are scared of strangers, so to speak. People are scared about what we're going to become, who we are, who we're changing to. How do the newcomers fit in? How do we as natives, if you want to call us natives, how are we going to handle it? There's so many unknowns now that maybe weren't there. Maybe those unknowns were there in the 1800s, but they weren't to the degree they are now. So that's why this whole melting pot issue is an issue now, is a concern right now. Fear of strangers isn't anything new. I mean, we had the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. We were afraid of the Chinese. We were afraid of that. You had the 1920s, the resurgence of the KKK, and it wasn't the KKK just against Black people. It was through Catholics and Jews and immigrants. So we've had this fear for a long time, and how we handle that, how we handle the diversity of that, is what's changing the face of what we're going through. I read that historians argue that there was a greater consensus in the past on what it meant to be an American. We struggle with that now, unfortunately. We struggle with the fact that really, what is an American? What defines America? What makes us American? It says today, the historians are saying there's more emphasis on preserving your ethnic identity and finding ways to highlight it and defend it. And that's not bad, but the more you try to defend your unity, the more you get away from your unity. If I want to make a class, even let's say I want to have a college of all girls, an all girls college, which we have an all girls college. I want so hard to preserve that. I'm hurting the diversity of it. I'm not seeing how the guys could, if I opened it up to males, how that could influence and how that could create a richer learning environment potentially. That was a basic example, but you kind of get the idea. We're so scared of losing who we are and losing our identity that we're afraid to embrace that it's okay to be different as long as we come under one common goal. Those arguments are being made that the more diverse we become, there's potential that it's okay, we can make this done. Back in the 1800s, we were never willing to give up the fact of what our values were as an American. People were willing to work towards that. Now we've gotten so far away from that we're learning to live like that. We're learning to understand that it's okay. If you constantly make concessions for something, bad behavior, or if you constantly excuse a behavior, then eventually you learn to live with that behavior and you think it's normal. I mean, think about it. Everything is so separate now. You have sitcoms on TV that are specific to nationalities. You have movies that are specific to nationalities. You have, in colleges, you'll have different student associations, like the Latin American Student Association, the Black American Student Association. You have such diversity that we're starting to live separately under the umbrella of the United States of America. And unfortunately, that in some degree is making us maybe a weaker nation than a stronger nation. The one thing, though, that you don't see where there's a lot of diversity is in our churches. You just don't see that. You still have pockets of people that share the same goals and desires of different nations and different ethnicities. I have a hard time saying that word. Mr. Kidd just walked in. He's correcting my English. But anyway, so I think unfortunately we've moved away from the whole melting pot image that made America great to where now we're trying to be so different and we're so afraid of losing who we are that we're losing who we are as American. And that's unfortunate. Think about it. When you I don't know if you've ever been to the restaurant called the Melting Pot. I don't know if they have them up here in Pennsylvania. I know they had them all over Virginia. I've never been, but it's kind of like a fondue place where you can dip. They melt different cheeses and you have different things you can dip in them, and they have dessert fondue. I've never been, but you get the idea of melting stuff together and eating it. And when you melt things together, you have different ingredients that come together. I mean, you melt different spices, you melt different cheeses, you melt different things. And the whole point is when you melt it together, it's to make something better. It's to make something taste different than what all the different ingredients were. You never want to add anything that's going to make it taste bad. You want to add something that's only going to enhance the flavor. And that's kind of where we're sitting with the whole melting pot, is when people in the 1800s had this wave of immigration that made America known as a melting pot, they were willing to come together to make the whole pot better, so to speak. And we just have to be careful in America that we don't lose that we don't lose our values and who we are as an American. And we can always, diversity is great. We don't have, diversity is not a bad thing. So I just want to leave there. Actually, it's going to keep me out in about 5 minutes. But I just wanted to bring that up. I wouldn't be able to talk much about the United States of America if we didn't talk about the whole melting pot, the immigration. America is still a great country, guys, by far. No matter where we are. I mean, look at how we're coming together with this coronavirus stuff. How many we're, people helping people, neighbor helping neighbor. And I'm sure you see that across the country. We're seeing a lot more of that as different news organizations and news outlets are showing us different things across the country. But we are America, United States. It's a great country to live in. I've said that from day one when we've started talking about Asia, being so thankful for what we have here in America. So we're going to stop there. Tomorrow we're going to pick up talking about some resources, the industries, what makes America unique in that regard. Up on ThinkWave, real quick, I have put, you should have your homework that's going to be due on Friday. You have a current event due and your homework due on Friday. If you go to ThinkWave, you'll see the assignment. You will have until the end of class time on Friday to turn all that in. You don't have to have it in before class starts. You can turn it in at the end of class on Friday. If you want to go on now and get it done and upload it now, you're more than welcome to do that. Or you don't have to wait. It's not like you're physically handing it to me. You can do it ahead of time if you like. But remember, your current event is over just some aspect of North America, and that includes Canada, the United States, and Mexico, whatever you want to do. So tomorrow we'll pick up there. Raise your hands. Anyone have any questions? Anyone want to raise your hand? No? Okay, I'm going to unmute you guys. I only have about 3 minutes before it kicks me out, so I'm going to unmute everybody. You may talk to one another, or you can get off the meeting, whatever you want. So I'm still listening, but you can talk to one another. So I give you the chance to talk and nobody's talking. I don't give you that chance to talk and everybody wants to talk. Can you go? Yes, you can sign out of the meeting. That's not a problem. You don't have to stay. We'll see you guys tomorrow morning. Well, I won't see you tomorrow morning. I'll see you tomorrow afternoon. I know. All right, everyone's getting up. Okay, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end the meeting. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good afternoon, okay? All right, bye-bye.